people started asking if Sydney Sweeney was okay, and not in the casual headline click way, but with genuine concern. Something had happened on the set of her latest boxing film, and suddenly fans were worried. Critics were puzzled, and Hollywood, as usual, acted like nothing was out of the ordinary. Sydney, after all, is known as the bright rom-com favorite, a red carpet staple, someone who can flip from charm to heartbreak in an instant. To most people, she's effortless. What they didn't see was that behind the scenes, this role demanded far more than emotional range. It left her with a real concussion. That's because Sydney doesn't ease into roles. She dives headfirst. When she signed on to portray Christy Martin, the legendary boxer who redefined women's boxing, she refused to rely on movie magic. This wasn't going to be a safe, stylized performance polished in the editing room. Instead, she committed with almost reckless intensity, as if proving something not just to the audience, but to herself. She transformed her grandmother's shed in Idaho into a gritty boxing gym, packed on over 30 pounds of solid muscle, and trained like a real contender preparing for a title fight. Every punch, every movement carried weight, both physical and personal. By the time cameras rolled, Sydney wasn't just playing a fighter, she had pushed her body to the brink to understand one. And that dedication, impressive as it was, came at a very real cost. She wasn't easing into the role with light cardio or polite training montages. Sydney Sweeney turned herself into a one-woman demolition crew. Yet the headline that followed her transformation wasn't about her becoming a boxing icon, it was about her being concussed on set, a phrase no actor ever wants attached to their name. The story behind it was unsettling. Determined to make the fight scenes feel real, Sydney reportedly pushed back against the safety net of post-production polish, choosing authenticity over illusion. It was the kind of intensity that made people pause and wonder who exactly was supposed to step in and say no. Hollywood has long romanticized this brand of dedication, applauding actors who reshape their bodies, exhaust their emotions, and flirt with physical limits in the name of realism. But there's a fine line between commitment and recklessness, and Sydney's injury made that line painfully clear. At some point, the pursuit of authenticity starts to feel less like filmmaking and more like a modern gladiator arena. Sydney later admitted that boxing made her feel alive, a statement that landed with a mix of admiration and concern, echoing the kind of thrill-seeking confession people make right before leaping into something dangerous, chasing meaning through impact rather than safety. She wanted to shatter the familiar image of being seen as just the pretty girl, an ambition that sounded empowering until the path she chose involved taking punches hard enough to leave her concussed. There was an unspoken desperation beneath it, a sense that she needed to prove, to Hollywood, to critics, to everyone watching, that she was different, tougher, more serious than her peers, as if respect could only be earned through pain. In no other profession would that logic make sense. Commitment isn't measured by how much damage you're willing to endure. Yet, the industry quietly watched as she pushed herself past reasonable limits, applauding the sacrifice instead of questioning it. Then came the cruel twist. After the intense training, the physical transformation, the bruises, the injuries, and the very real toll on her body, the movie arrived. And barely anyone noticed. It opened in thousands of theaters and scraped together a box office return so small, it felt almost symbolic. Audiences stayed home, critics shrugged, and the conversation shifted from dedication to disappointment. People wondered whether it was fatigue with boxing stories, indifference toward the film itself, or the persistent truth that movies about women in sports rarely receive the same enthusiasm as those led by men. And hovering over it all was the uncomfortable realization that Hollywood still has an appetite for suffering, especially when it can be framed as artistic devotion, romanticizing pain while quietly moving on when the sacrifice doesn't pay off. Hollywood loves to pretend that suffering is the same thing as greatness. Actors wasting away until they look like haunted stick figures? Inspiring. Actors gaining so much weight their nutritionist starts sweating? Groundbreaking. Actors getting genuinely hurt on set? Apparently powerful. Somewhere along the way, pain stopped being a risk and started being a requirement. Sydney Sweeney's concussion wasn't treated like a problem. It became a selling point, a quirky anecdote for interviews, a badge of honor, a "can you believe how committed she is?" moment, laughing it off like, "Haha, I couldn't remember where I was for a bit, but the shot looked amazing." No, absolutely not. That's not dedication, that's negligence dressed up as art. If you walked into a normal office job with a concussion, HR wouldn't applaud you. They'd call an ambulance and then write a very serious email. But in Hollywood, they clap. They frame it as passion. And when you actually break down who benefits from this, the answer gets uncomfortable fast. It's not Sydney. It's not the fans. It's not the box office. The only people winning are studio executives safely removed from the chaos, bragging about authentic fight choreography while sipping lattes in rooms nowhere near flying fists. The message becomes clear and toxic. If you want respect, you have to bleed for it. That standard lands especially hard on women, who already carry the burden of proving they're more than a stereotype. There's a long, depressing history of women in Hollywood being told to tolerate things men are rarely asked to endure. Extreme diets, unsafe stunts, painful costumes, emotional manipulation, and now, apparently, concussions. Push harder, take more pain, break yourself a little if you want to be taken seriously. But strength shouldn't be measured by how much damage someone can absorb. Pain isn't a resume skill. Trauma isn't a trophy. And no amount of award season hype, critical praise, or authenticity is worth risking your health, especially something as irreplaceable as your brain. Rewriting what strength really means starts with acknowledging that Sydney Sweeney is strong. There's no debate there. She reshaped herself physically, emotionally, and mentally for the role, checking every box of the classic Hollywood grind people love to turn into inspirational quotes. But strength shouldn't come with a neurologist on standby. Power doesn't have to mean permanent damage, and dedication doesn't require turning your brain into a piñata. Real strength is knowing where the line is. Real commitment is being able to say, I'll give you everything except my literal consciousness. And real success is leaving a project with your talent celebrated, not your MRI results. So, is something seriously wrong with Sydney Sweeney? Physically, she says she's fine, though the concussion tells its own quiet story. What's more troubling is the system around her, the industry that encourages this level of sacrifice, applauds it loudly, and then shrugs when audiences barely respond. Something is broken when pain becomes a marketing angle, when suffering is treated like proof of credibility, and when actors feel they have to hurt themselves just to be taken seriously. Something is deeply wrong when the person who takes all the hits, literally, is the only one who pays the price. Because in the end, the goal shouldn't be to see who can endure the most damage. It should be to create meaningful, powerful art without turning someone's body into collateral. That's the real story behind what happened to Sydney Sweeney. Not just a tale of commitment, but a warning about an industry that still confuses pain with purpose.